حضورنا الكريم، ننتقل إلى الجلسة الثانية والتي تحمل عنوان جاهزية الذكاء الاصطناعي وبناء النظام البيئي المستقبلي.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's second session discusses AI Readiness, Building the Future Ecosystem.
يشارك في هذه الجلسة كل من سعادة مطر الحميري الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة حكومة دبي الرقمية.
This session speakers are His Excellency Matar Al-Hmairi, Chief Executive, Digital Dubai Government Establishment.
هاريسون لانغ الرئيس التنفيذي للشؤون الاستراتيجية في مجموعة E&.
Harrison Lung, Group Chief Strategy Officer of E&.
وبريا لاكاني المؤسسة والمديرة التنفيذية لشركة سنتري تك.
Priya Lakani, Founder and CEO of Century Tech.
دكتورة حنان سلام المؤسسة المشاركة لنادي المرأة في الذكاء الاصطناعي ومديرة معهد سمارت في جامعة نيويورك أبو ظبي.
Dr. Hanan Salam, co-founder of Women in AI and director of Smart Lab at NYU Abu Dhabi.
تدير هذه الجلسة إيثار التني المؤسسة ومستشارة السياسات في مبادرة تكنيكاتك.
Think Tank. The session will be moderated by Ithar Al-Tanay, founder and policy advisor of Think Tank Initiative. Please welcome on stage.
السلام عليكم، كيفك يا بسنسي؟ Should we start? It's working. I think we should start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ithar El-Tani. I'm a government innovation and public policy advisor and a founder of Think Tank Initiative. It is my absolute pleasure to moderate this crucial discussion on AI readiness, building the future ecosystem. We stand at the cusp of a technological revolution. Artificial intelligence is no longer a futuristic fantasy. It's rapidly weaving itself into the fabric of our lives, transforming industries and reshaping our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. This session dives into the heart of this transformation, exploring the critical need for AI readiness, not just technologically, but also ethically, economically, and socially. We are seeing exciting advancements in AI across various sectors, from healthcare and finance to education and entertainment. But with this rapid progress comes vital questions. How do we ensure responsible AI development and deployment? What skills will be essential to thrive in an AI-driven economy? And how do we navigate the ethical considerations that arise as AI becomes increasingly integrated into our decision-making process? To address these complex questions and more, I'm thrilled to introduce our esteemed panel of experts. His Excellency Matar Al-Hmairi, the Chief Executive of Digital Dubai Government Establishment, bringing invaluable insights from the forefront of government implementation of AI. Priya Lakhani, OB, founder, CEO of Century Tech and BBC AI Decoded, correspondent, sharing her expertise on the intersection of AI and education, as well as the importance of ethical AI. Dr. Hanan Salam, co-founder of Women in AI and assistant professor at NYU Abu Dhabi, providing an academic and entrepreneurial lens on AI and its societal impact and the need for diverse representation in the field. And last but not least, we have with us Mr. Harrison Lung, who's a Group Chief Strategy Officer at E&, offering a strategic perspective on the role of AI and shaping future of business and technology. Welcome. I think we're all eager here to hear their perspective and engage in a thought-provoking discussion that will help us understand more and chart a course towards a future where AI empowers us all. And if we can begin with the first round of questions, Your Excellency. I want to address the AI in government implementation. I want to ask you, basically, when we discuss AI readiness, could you outline for us the key components of this AI-driven ecosystem? And additionally, based on Dubai's experience, we'd like to know what role the government plays in enabling and supporting this system.
Thank you, Ithar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to thank the organizers, Mohammed bin Rashid, Knowledge Foundation, and also UNDP for the great gathering and also for the opportunity to speak to you today. Before answering your question, Ithar, I would like just to give a brief overview about Digital Dubai and what do we do in Digital Dubai. Digital Dubai was established by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, UAE Vice President, Prime Minister, and ruler of Dubai, in June 2021. And our mission is to digitize life in Dubai, to make Dubai the best city for living, the best city for doing business, and also to visit. And our portfolio, rich with many applications and initiatives and programs in the city, starting from public services, moving to shared services, to enablement layer for the government and others. For example, for public services, we have our super app, Dubai Now, which is used by more than 1.5 million users in the city. And we have also in the shared services, many services in terms of cloud, infrastructure, and also ERP system, which is today used by more than 75 government entities in the government of Dubai. And the third example of our portfolio is the UAE Pass. I'm sure that many users today in this avenue, they are using UAE Pass. We have more than 9 million users today using UAE Pass, which is giving you access to many services in the government and federal level. So going back to your question, Ithar, in terms of the main component of AI ecosystems, I can say that there are 6 components. They are driving the ecosystem for AI. The first one starting with AI governance, which is actually focusing on the vision, policy, strategies, and governance related to the AI ecosystems. Our story here in UAE, we started with a bold vision in 2017 with making UAE the hub of the AI by 2031. We were the first nation to appoint an AI minister in worldwide, and also to focus and to give a priority for this file. Also in Dubai, we have run multiple initiatives and iterations. His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed, the Crown Prince of Dubai, launched Dubai Universal Blueprint for AI in order to accelerate the adoption of AI and also to have a sandbox for the security policies and the governance. The second component is related to the research and development. That is very important, especially when we are talking about having a proper setup for sandbox for testing, identifying use cases, and also upskilling our resources in the government or even the private sectors. The third component, I can say, that is data infrastructure. Having a good AI use case requires a good data, and that is very important to make sure that to fuel such technologies there. And today, when we look at it, for example, from a Dubai perspective, Dubai started this journey 7 years ago, having a data law for the government and having a proper governance in terms of how to share the data, how to quantify the data, classify the data, and to keep it open for the public in order to utilize it for many use cases, whether it's for Internet of Things or using it for AI. And another component which is in the ecosystem is the talent development. Talent development is very important, especially that with the emerging technology, without the workforce that running this technology, it will be useless in terms of having such technologies without the right manpower on that. Industry ecosystem, which is the partnership between the public and private sector. And this is very important to make sure that this dialogue is always open and always there is a proper partnership and collaboration between the private and the government. Today, if you look at it, for example, in 2024, we have multiple forums, we have multiple discussions with our partners in the city, One of them, for example, the AI retreat, which happened this year. It was focusing on the main implication of the AI in terms of social, or if it is economic, or if it is, for example, related to ethics of using the AI. And the last component is digital infrastructure. Having, for example, a proper digital infrastructure enables such technology to be used within the public, or to be used within the government and the private side. Today, UAE ranked first in terms of telecommunication infrastructure, in terms of having the data centers, and the government today is allocating lands to expand and to satisfy the needs for the demand of having more data centers in the country. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this. I'll move on to Priya. Priya, you've served on the UK government's AI Council. You've also co-founded the Institute for Ethical AI. How do you create an AI strategy to enable this transition to basically being able to use the technology? And what are the key ethical considerations that one needs to consider?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So how do you create the AI strategy? So many of you will be in business, you'll be thinking, how can I leverage this and take advantage of all of the opportunities? What I'm seeing, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, where there's this race since the launch of generative AI to involve AI in lots of business operations, is a couple of issues and a couple of problems, okay? The first thing is that the majority of the world in business, when they're looking at AI, they're thinking solely of generative AI. That's a problem. Generative AI is phenomenal, has so many potential use cases, but they're forgetting the other side of AI, which is more kind of non-generative or like classical AI. So taking proprietary data sets from the business and then being able to utilize that for good use. So that's one thing not to do, is don't forget the rest of artificial intelligence and machine learning. On the strategy side, what we're seeing is CEOs, members of the C-suite, are going to their businesses and they're saying, I want to use AI now, otherwise we're going to be disrupted, right? And so people are thinking about AI first. Now, it's really important that you do one thing, which is ensure that every person across your business has at least a high-level understanding of what AI is, what machine learning can do, generative, non-generative, and then where it can apply in the business. Why? Because it's all the people in your organization who will come up with those ideas, those opportunities that you can take advantage of. It's not simply a chief innovation officer's job to be able to do that. In order to enable you, everyone needs to be upskilled in this area. And I do say, and it's quite harsh, but if there is one person in your organization that is not upskilled at a high level to understand where the opportunities are, they're a single point of failure in your business over the next 3 to 5 years. So then how to build that strategy? Don't start with AI. The one thing that you know very well is your business. So what you do is you take your goals. What are the goals that you want to achieve over the next 2, 3, 5 years? And then what are the problems? And those you know very, very well. List them. And then alongside those goals, alongside those problems, you do what I call the 3 Ps. If you understand at a high level what machine learning can do, that you have a lot of data, source of data, and in the next talk when I keynote, I've actually got something on this so I can help you with that, how to understand the data that's feeding the system. You then have the AI model, and then you've got the output. Understanding that, go through the list of problems, go through the list of goals that you want to achieve, and see, can machine learning, can artificial intelligence, different types of AI, help me in the 3 Ps? The 3 Ps. The 3 Ps are, number 1, productivity. Can it help us to be more productive? What we mean by the 3 Ps, and the first P, productivity, is the 2 As. Where can it automate what we're doing? Where can it potentially augment my labour force and what I'm doing? The second P is, where can it help me to predict? Where can it create predictions? And often when we're looking at predictions, we're using non-generative AI. So for any of you running those businesses, you're in industry, would you like a crystal ball into the future? Would you like to be able to try and forecast demand? Would you like to try and identify where your supply chain might be weak and where you might actually do better with, for example, a backup supplier or another supplier? So where can AI help me to create those predictions so I can then operate my business in a way and resource myself effectively to be able to exploit those gains? And then the third P is the one that I think everyone's very familiar with, particularly in the last couple of years, is personalization. How do I personalize for key stakeholders? So for my customers who are out there, but also internally. How can I personalize for staff? How can I get buy-in, both upwards, horizontally, and downwards? So creating that strategy is about, again, don't necessarily start with AI. There is something to be done about thinking about the technology and where it could be disruptive. But actually your immediate gain is where are the goals and where are the problems. So that's a short-term strategy. And then the long-term is where could this be truly disruptive, not just for my products and services, but also for my business model. And when you think about business model, we're not very far from a major disruption that occurs. So if you think about platform disruption, right? Platform disruption has only occurred and happened in the last decade. So think about, and I'm going to use slightly westernized companies, so I apologize, but I understand that there are many in the UAE that exist here within the same sorts of sectors. But if you think about Uber, it's one of the world's most valuable taxi company, yet it doesn't own a taxi. Think about Netflix, the world's most valuable movie house, yet it doesn't own a cinema. Think about Airbnb, the world's most valuable accommodation provider, yet it doesn't own a hotel, right? So think about that sort of disruption where that's not too long ago that technology companies use platforms to disrupt sectors. And then think, okay, where could this technology similarly disrupt my sector? And then to finalize, I don't want to overtake the microphone,
Absolutely.
but to answer the second part of your question on the ethics. When you're thinking about responsible use of AI, which I think is on all of your minds, and obviously you'll be looking at regulation, you'll be looking at regulation here and at home, in the UAE, but you'll also be a global company, you'll be looking at regulations so that whatever you're producing as a startup or a scale-up is applicable to other markets, right? And so you can make those commercial economic gains. So you'll be looking at regulation, but the other thing is, in terms of ethics, to think about transparency. Am I informing key stakeholders, customers, that AI is in use in this system, right? Think about accountability. When you're taking those systems, whether you're building them yourselves, whether you're using a third-party supplier and bringing those products and services in, right? Is there somebody in my organization that is accountable for the use of this system, to review it, to test it, to red team it, to ensure that it's not operating in a way in which we didn't perceive it to operate initially? And then think about fairness. Is it a fair system? And when we talk about fairness, we usually tend to then talk about bias. And that again, and I'll address this a little bit in the next presentation, AI is a model, right? AI is not magic, it is mathematics. And so nobody would say on this planet that His Excellency's brain, which is its own neural network, is the same as my brain, which is my own neural network. In the same way, no AI model is the same, right? Different AI models operate differently. They're being trained by different sources of data. Then there's a different mathematical model, a very complex one within that model, and then you get your output. So when you're thinking about fairness, you need to ask yourself the question, what data is feeding that model, right? If it's movie recommendations, you might not be so fussed about the sort of data it's collecting. But if it's a diagnosis in terms of healthcare, you might be, and you might worry about that. So thinking about the data feeding into the model, I think it's common sense then to understand where could there be a bias. If you're thinking about a recruiting algorithm, should we use historical recruiting data to suggest the next role for an individual? Well, no, because the world has shown that historically it's biased when it comes to recruitment. So we don't want that. We don't want to essentially put and amplify those biases historically into our AI models so it perpetuates the bias. So those are the key areas that I would look at. And I would just say to everyone, don't be afraid to question AI models. And again, where's the data? Where's it come from? Think about that. What am I trying to achieve with this? And then again, going back to your strategy, what do I think the key gains will be for me when it comes to those 3 Ps? Is it a productive use? Is it to help me predict? Or is it to help me personalize?
Perfect. There's some
Thank
really good
you.
insights into that answer. Thank you
you.
so much. I'd like to ask Harrison Lung about Ian's work. We want to know how Ian utilizes AI technology, basically, and what has the journey been like so far with Ian? Maybe if you could shed some light on the kind of projects you're working on and what the ambitions for the future are, please.
Yeah. No, thank you for your question. And I think similar to what Priya said, at the end of the day, AI in itself is a technology, and there's a lot that goes around it, from the human-centric element to the technology that His Excellency talked about, and so on and so forth. And even for EN, the applicability and the deployment of AI has actually been undertaken for many years. And I think it hasn't really been until the last 2 years where ChatGPT has been so public that people see the power of it, and that really got people thinking and the top of the news cycle in many cases into the boardrooms where board members and CEOs actually come back and say, I want this in my organization. For us, historically, we've deployed things like data analytics, AI in managing the network. How do we ensure that it is up and resilient? How do we ensure that we have the right reliability for our customers? And I think it's actually very interesting because EN operates across 38 countries and markets. These countries range from places like the UAE, where we're super advanced, high aspiration, willingness to invest, and the willingness to try, to even in some cases where markets and countries are more emerging and less lower in the technology adoption curve. So we actually have the flexibility across all these markets to test out the AI technology. And I want to share a few examples. And some of our use cases, I would say, is actually at the forefront of our overall strategy. In fact, 2 years ago, when we outlined our new corporate strategy, the usage of AI and digital technology was what we call digitizing and transforming operations. This includes both at the customer experience end, so really front end in facing our customers, to even our internal operations. In terms of front end and facing the customers, we are the first telecom operator globally to launch a fully autonomous store. In fact, it's actually across the street in our Al Khafaf office. We've also launched one in Dubai Mall, so I would encourage everyone to check it out. Inside this fully autonomous store, where there are no employees, we have hundreds of cameras that will first track as you enter into the store, linking to your mobile phone number, through facial recognition system to your Emirates ID. So we actually know which customer you are, or maybe in some cases you're a guest or a tourist. Once you're inside the store, these cameras then can track your movements, identify the items that you may want to buy, and as you pick stuff up off the shelf and into your basket, it would actually add it to your shopping carts, almost like a virtual but physical shopping cart like Amazon. And when you check out, it would actually know that you actually picked up, let's say, an iPhone 16, you picked up a new pair of AirPods, and charge it directly, because we actually have your credit card information linked to your account. That just shows you the power of AI in a fully integrated situation that is solving a particular use case. We've actually deployed AI in, I would say, less upfront situations, and I'll give you a few examples as well to really bring it to light. First is on the telecom side. I think nowadays everyone gets a lot of spam or spam phone calls, similar for SMSs. We've actually deployed AI to decrease that dramatically, right? By looking at who's calling, how often, which numbers are calling, is it registered, is it not? So that whatever number of spam and scam calls are out there has been reduced dramatically. Second is, in addition to our telecom use cases and asset, we actually are the majority owner of StarsPlay, which is an OTT platform similar to Netflix, as well as Cream Technology, the super app here in the region. For StarsPlay, we're actually able to deploy AI to do real-time live dubbing of the content. So in the past, if you think about it, if we get a Hollywood hit, we get the content, somebody needs to sit there over a course of 2 hours. Let's assume it's a movie. They will write down word by word, what is it, translate it, give the script to somebody who's going to actually sit in a studio to then record it. This is typically a multi-week or multi-month process. With AI, you can actually deploy and play this film through the AI algorithm and translate it to any local languages. In fact, in addition to the broader family of, let's say, Arabic, you can actually translate to certain dialects as well. And actually can change the mouth and the lips movement to make it as seamless as possible. In Kareem Super App, and this is also very behind the scenes, right? We have certain SLAs where we want to deliver your food or your grocery within a certain period of time. As it gets busy, for example, during dinner time, we will reduce the catchment area of where the captain or the rider will go from the restaurant to your home so that it meets that certain KPI. So as you can see, AI is already amongst us. We are deploying it at scale, a number of different use cases, and in fact, you may not even see it.
Very interesting. Thank you so much.
I have a
yeah,
question
please
for
go
my
ahead.
colleague here. So there was a story on an expose on the Amazon shops where they have all the cameras that you described, and I know that's different, but they were talking about facial recognition and AI, but it turned out there were actually thousands of people in somewhere like, it was either the Philippines or in Bangalore, who were looking at the cameras and actually calculating what you bought, what you put in your basket. And there was not as much AI as everyone was led to believe. So on the system that you described, is it true facial recognition, or are there humans in the loop who are helping determine what you're buying?
So fortunately, unfortunately, we don't have thousands of people sitting in the Philippines or wherever managing this. I would say because this is an evolution of the technology, it's not 100% perfect, and I'll be the first one to say. There are still, I would say, 1 or 2 staff at each location that will help support any potential manual intervention. So for example, if, through the facial recognition system, some people may be wearing contacts a particular day versus glasses, or they changed their hairstyle, or they picked up a product and put it back, right? There are always going to be boundary conditions now that even as the algorithm and the AI and the technology behind the scenes improve through this evolution, may still require some intervention. And I think the idea here is not to resolve it 100%, and I think the earlier panel said it best. It's not really about replacing people. It's about upping the game in terms of technology adoption, in terms of sort of using it as a competitive advantage as how we compete with other customers and things like that. But there's very little manual interventions typically.
And I think Dr. Hanan, maybe because she's working on developing socially and emotionally intelligent robots and machines, that may be an area she can shed light on to see, are we going to continue on relying on humans to work alongside AI, or with your work and what you're developing, you're looking at completely autonomous robots?
Yeah, so let me just say a little bit about what does this work entail. So I work on the development of socially and emotionally intelligent machines like robots, or even virtual agents, or even computer applications that are able to interact naturally and in a seamless manner with the humans, and that can also be integrated in our life. Basically this work entails 3 axes. The first one is basically the recognition or the perception of the human social signals. So I work on social AI, where we want AI that is able to understand all kinds of social cues, just like a human, from a simple head nod to the engagement, if a person is engaged or not, or their personality or emotions. Then there is also the social generation, so social cues generation, so the capacity of these robots or machines to actually show that they are socially intelligent by using their bodies, or even if they don't have bodies, certain cues. And finally, I'm interested in the application of such machines for social good. So I focus only on applications for good, which are for healthcare and education. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah. How has the journey been so far as well?
The journey has been exciting. This work is, if I want to characterize it, it is interdisciplinary and it is multidisciplinary. So it needs the collaboration of multiple stakeholders, starting from psychologists, psychiatrists, computer scientists, engineers, or even policymakers, because when you are creating a robot that is able to understand humans and that is intelligent, we say socially intelligent. Some humans are not socially intelligent, so if you are equipping a robot or a machine with that, so you need also to work on some ethical considerations, and for that you need governments and policymakers.
And are we there yet?
Okay, so we are not there yet, of course, but we are able to do some stuff. You can find, systems that are able to recognize the personality of the user, the emotions, different, social cues, and in good accuracy. However, it's still not possible to, capture the complexity of the social, of the human, of the social aspects of a human-machine interaction. Yeah. So
Great. Good luck with that. We'd love to see how that's going to end up looking like. Your Excellency, Doctora mentioned the importance of regulation and how the government, what the role of the government as a facilitator and a regulator for AI. Can you shed some light on what Dubai has been doing to facilitate that from a regulation perspective?
Thank you. When it comes as an example, for example, for AI use cases, I think the best things is to start from a framework of identifying,
Can
let's
I
say, the
bring
mo-
this
most,
closer?
sorry, the most impactful the most impactful AI use case. That is very important. I need to have a framework to identify, for example, these use cases across the city. What we did actually here in Dubai, as part of the initiative Dubai Center for AI, we work within a framework for identifying the use cases. We work collectively with the government departments to identify the top use services we see, for example, will be impactful by the AI use cases. And based on our findings so far, we can say that it can be identified in multiple streams. But also I would like to mention the comment which I heard it from my colleague here. When we are selecting the right use case, and for example, when you look at the use cases today for Gen AI, you see something going to conversational AI, you see something, for example, going to different type of AI. AI is not new today, for example, in the world. It started a long time ago, maybe in 60s. Let's say the hype today, which we see it since 2 years, is because of Gen AI. It's accessible by many public, let's say, users and the worldwide. However, when it comes for identifying the use cases, we see that the conversational use cases with the human is less impactful. As per the report from Gartner's, we see that it is going to 5% as a return on investment of investing in such use cases. The one which are, for example, having an impact on the operational processes or operational of any government or private sector, that's the one which is actually going to enhance and give you maybe 15 to 20% or 30%. The one which are actually going to be very disruptive is the one which is going to have a new discovery, that you are going to introduce a new product or to introduce something going to have a big impact, for example, in the society. Some of the examples, for example, here in Dubai, today when you are landing to the airport, the smart gate which you see it, this is based on machine learning, based on AI, it's not based on Gen AI. However, it is smoothing our operations, for example, in the airport. It is giving the pass, for example, for many travelers coming to the airport. Seeing, for example, the safety of the city itself, where we see, for example, a lot of technologies there handling the traffic, handling, for example, the CCTVs which are from the public areas. And these are the one which we see it as an example of use cases. When it comes for public services, we have something like Dubai AI City Concierge. We wanted to have a qualified, trusted information provided for our public. And these are also today accessible, available for our citizens and residents.
So if I hear it correctly, basically you're talking about how the use cases can be used for governments to learn from and then build on that with the private sector to create regulations, basically that will support and continue to support the development of new AI technology. Priya, I know we spoke about you own your CEO of a tech company that's doing really well. I want to know what you think about how AI is overhyped or not, and whether you think what is left for a human in a world that is dominated by AI.
Yeah. So is AI overhyped, right? Look, I like to say it's everything, everywhere, all at once at the moment. It's all over the media, and we're seeing it in pretty much every broadsheet within the first 3-4 pages. There's an AI story now. Is it overhyped? Well, you see, I would say no, it's not, because the rate of development is so fast, and what you're seeing every day is real life application. When people ask the question, usually what they're talking about is, are we going to get to some form of AGI, artificial general intelligence, some form of superintelligence? And really, they're very much focusing on the headlines created by Satya Nadella, by Elon Musk, by Sam Altman, the faces of generative AI. Because there is a goal that a couple of those individuals have, a few of those individuals have, where they are determined to reach this super intelligence that they talk about. And actually understanding what that means is really important. But is it overhyped? No, because not enough of us are using it as effectively as we could to take advantage of all the opportunities that exist today. My colleague here talked about, making certain operations really efficient, right? Being able to leverage those in many different use cases. My other colleague talks about healthcare and education, that ability to have personalized medicine, the ability to be able to, not only develop drugs for the particular individual faster, and I'll talk about AlphaFold and DeepMind shortly when I speak, and all of the different sorts of opportunities, and I work in education. And what we do know is there are so many more opportunities where you could all be using this technology, governments could be using this technology to make even better evidence-based policy-making decisions, being able to see in an instant when any particular region within the UAE needs specific support in the educational system, and doing that not after the exams are over, but doing that tomorrow, instantly, as soon as that insight becomes available. But we have a lot of work to do to ensure that we can leverage the technology that way. So the potential is there in that sense. That overhype piece on the Gen AI, we're going to wait and see. Look, the people who talk about AGI, superintelligence, what is possible, is it going to be smarter than humans? I agree with you. In some cases, it already is, in terms of the sorts of, some of the intelligence you might see on some social media platforms by some humans make you think, hang on, maybe this already is. But on a very serious note, we don't know. There are some people who are very involved in the development of this technology who say it will be in the next 12 months, others 5 years, others 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, others never. So we'll watch the developments. But the thing is there's so much to take advantage of today, which is, I think, the key point, right? And you can get very, very involved in that utopia versus dystopia debate, right? That's really easy to have with friends and colleagues. What that does do helpfully is raise some of the ethical issues, which we've already talked about, whether we want AI to achieve a certain status of intelligence. But actually, again, just for those real-world use cases, those impact sectors, those public service sectors, there's an enormous amount of opportunity. So it's about developing that AI strategy we talked about earlier, looking at those 3 Ps, and with some urgency, thinking, how can I use this technology responsibly, in a good way, where I can then achieve those goals. So the hype questions are really interesting ones. Should we be worried? There are definitely things to be worried about. I'm going to cover some of those shortly in my keynote. But there are tools that we can develop. There are skills we're going to have to nurture. We have to take a look at the curriculum across the world, curricula, on how we are educating our children, because they are going to be growing up in a world with technology all over the place. It is here today, but even more kind of infiltrated in their lives. And there are things that we could do today that try and ensure that we never see those harms, that we never need to be worried. What's so interesting about all of you who are sat in front of us today is this is in your hands. You are living in the era where those regulations, those policies, those ethical guidelines will be developed. So it's up to us to work on defining those so that we can create that safer, very progressive future utilizing the technology, where we can talk about some of the crazy media articles that we've seen, but say, no, it wasn't overhyped. Here are all of the things that we did to progress humanity. And actually be really excited about that, because there is so much work to be done. Let's face it, there is still inequality, inequity all over the world. But what's so fascinating living in this time, you're in 2024, is you are the citizens that will decide how that goes. Was it a mistake to allow AI to become so progressive, or was that the most advanced, impressive, impactful in a positive way technology that we had of our time? And that is why I think that this topic, it's on every stage. Whether you're here at the Knowledge Summit, whether you're in any conference anywhere in the world, AI is a headline topic, but it is really, really important that everybody takes it seriously and don't bat it off as something that's overhyped and not important, because there is so much that we need to do here and so much that we need to take advantage of.
And surprisingly, the uptake, you would think that people are, with this overhype idea, there's a lot of people who are still not using ChatGPT and Midjourney and whatnot.
A lot of people, in this room, I'm going to ask the audience to now put your hand up if you use AI on a daily basis. Okay, brilliant. Okay, keep your hands up. Are you searching? Are you seeing, for example, if you're Googling, Google SQE, come up with the summaries at the top because then you're using AI? Right, keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. Do you watch films on a streaming service like a Netflix? Add your hands. Add your hands. You might not want to admit it. Are you using Facebook to find your friends? Okay. You're all of you are using AI on a daily basis. But are you leveraging the most advanced applications that exist today? And what's so interesting is there will be people in this room, outside of this room, that haven't played with a chatbot yet, generative AI, and you should, because it's not going to break you and you're not going to break it, so you should have a go. But learning how these things are developing and how to implement them is really important. But what I would say about the stage we're sitting in today, and I'm not just talking about this particular stage, I'm talking about the country that we're in. It's one of the most innovative forward-thinking countries in terms of its vision and where it wants to be. And if we think about the region, in terms of where you're investing, it's actually phenomenal the pace at which things can develop in this part of the world. So there is immense amount of opportunity across the globe. But what we're seeing is certain countries, and I'm from the UK, I'm a very, very proud Brit, who would say there is an enormous amount of research and development that happens obviously in the UK. We have obviously the US as well, and different things go on in different countries. It's really, really important to engage with those people who are innovating. Because once you can engage, if you're in business, for example, and you can try and push policy in the right direction to be able to take advantage of those gains, then that's going to be better for everyone, but also safeguard and mitigate against the risks. And as you say, not everyone's using the most advanced tools available to them. And that's where I say there's some urgency. If you want just to look at it from a completely commercial perspective, just think about your bottom line. Think about how much more efficient you could be, how much more competitive you could be. Imagine if your competitors are leveraging this technology and their gains and their rate of gains are far higher than yours. So there is a commercial incentive, but then from an impact perspective, which is what I'm most interested in, for example, in education, there is a real imperative to ensure that we're utilising this technology to provide that wonderful positive impact that we can see not only here, for example, in the UAE, all over the world, and as my friend here said, trying to also achieve that in some of the areas of the world where it's not necessarily as advanced, but then they don't have legacy technology potentially. So there is potential to leapfrog because they don't have to get rid of old systems to put in new systems, which is actually quite exciting. But it's about helping each other ensure that we can come up with those goals, those visions, and then execute, and we don't create a digital divide, when it comes to using this really phenomenal advanced tech.
Absolutely, and I think that gives way to the next question to Harrison on governance. The importance of governance. Basically, you were a member of the World Economic Forum AI Governance Alliance. I want to know if you can share with us what a responsible global design of AI frameworks, governance frameworks looks like. And from transparency, inclusiveness to your point, and compliance, what does that mean for businesses as well?
Yeah. No, and I think I'll also answer that by linking to the previous question on whether AI is hyped or overhyped. Sure. Because I think, the fact that it is on the first 3 or 4 pages of any newspaper or web link, let's call it now, because not much newspaper, or even if you look at venture funding, anytime a startup has the word AI in it, the valuation goes through the roof. I wouldn't say it's overhyped, but I would say it's probably rightly hyped. Okay. And the reason is, if you take a step back, I think AI is an enduring technology that will be around forever. It is to the same level as the printing press, the locomotive, internet, mobile technology, right? Now, are we going to go through AI in its adoption and
هل سنتبنى الذكاء الاصطناعي وسيكون الأمر سلسا بعد ذلك؟ بالتأكيد لا. إذا ما نظرنا إلى قطاع الهواتف النقالة، ونعرف من قطاع الاتصالات هنا، فهناك الكثير من الانتقالات إلى الواي ماكس إلى أن وصلنا إلى 3G و4G وال5G، والآن بات الجميع منا يتبنى هذا المعيار ويطلق الشبكات والأجهزة التي تمتثل وتستعين بهذا المعيار. وبرأينا الذكاء الاصطناعي سيكون حالة شبيهة. لربما سنأخذ خطوتين إلى الأمام وخطوتين إلى الوراء، ولكن سنصل في نهاية المطاف إلى هدفنا. ولكن
is that the speed and the innovation and the adoption, this cycle is happening so much faster than some of the preceding technologies I talked about. And because of this, we at EN know that we cannot do it alone. And that is why, again, linking to His Excellency point, the public-private partnership with other entities is so important. 3 weeks ago at GITEX, we announced a $1 billion plus strategic partnership with Amazon. Part of that relationship includes upskilling and training our staff, as well as the broader UAE ecosystem, as well as our operating footprint, right? In your question relating to World Economic Forum and other entities, that is actually just one body, global organization that we're working with. This includes other areas like GSMA, which is a mobile telecom entity, even the United Nations and the ITU. And of course, there's also much more local and regional initiatives, such as the UNDP Arab states, as well as here in the UAE, the 20 plus chief AI officers that has been appointed recently, along with the Ministry of AI's office. So I think the whole idea here is how do we collaborate, share best practices, compare notes. In regards to the responsible framework, it's actually top to bottom, left to right. Top to bottom from a sense of, are we using the right data? Is it clean? How do we ensure it doesn't generate hallucination? On the platform side, how do we ensure that this is actually running the right algorithms, doing in a user privacy, data privacy way in a secure manner, so the data doesn't get exposed or hacked? Or even on the infrastructure, how do we ensure that all the energy and power that is powering the data center is being done sustainably, right? And even from a value chain perspective, what is the impact from an end user perspective to our employees, to our partners? And I think the broader notion of, and I think this links back to the question of today's panel, AI readiness, building the future ecosystem, you actually need an ecosystem of different partners that will really bring the advancement and the AI technology to bear.
I think on that note, I have to ask you an improvised question on integration of data. I mean, all of those all of these platforms require open data sharing. How do you find that cross-sectorally, and how do you overcome that as an issue?
This is a very complex question, and the reason is, again, we operate in 38 different markets, including Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Africa. The local rules and regulation for data sharing, user privacy is already very different. So we need to adhere to each one of that, number one. Number two is, because we are a global technology conglomerate, we have companies that we own outright 100%, where we have full access to the data. We have companies where we're majority, 51%, with a local partner or other financial partners. Then the question is, how do you share data? We have entities where we're minority. So for example, for those of you based here in the UAE, we're a minority investor at Weo Bank, the local neobank, similar to markets in the US or Revolut in the UK. Then the question is, can we share our UAE telco data with Weo so that they can better attract? It's very difficult. So I think we need to take all that into account in order to run the AI technology responsibly and holistically.
Because that can really enhance the work of AI technologies that you're using, having access to the right data that is updated and automated. I think that's a major issue. Maybe if you want to shed light on that, Priya.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was saying that's a real issue, being able to get access to real-time data to enhance your platforms. I think is a real issue in terms of efficiency as well. So having that access and not having it really makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what sort of system you're using. So most applications, for example, like ours in education, it's built to track the data. So every interaction on the system is tracked. So you end up with a big data system. You want unstructured big data because that's where you realize the real gains. This is all about, as I said, mathematics. It's patterns and correlations in a lot of information to be able to then predict, okay, well, what's the probability of that next output being the right output for whether it's, what you need to learn next, what your diagnoses might be, or how to get you through a traffic system very quickly so that you can reach your destination in some form of smart city. So the data collection on proprietary platforms actually would be built that way. And so when you sign up to use those platforms, there'll be privacy policies, and it will be very clear, hopefully in those policies, what's going on. In, for example, more of an infrastructure project, and these are the things that governments have to grapple with, it's not just what might be in platforms that they'd be able to take, but sensory data, for example, right? In a meteorological system, it'll be satellite data and sensory data. So you're right, grabbing all of the data, the right data, is really, really important, but it really varies depending on what system. And again, it goes back to just that simple point, which is every AI model is different, right? So how would one be grabbing that data from you, right? So, and that's the right question to ask. But I don't think it's an issue for those innovators, those entrepreneurs who are building new applications. And because when they're building those, they're building that in mind. The architecture of the system, the sort of database that they'd be using to store that data, the models that they're running on top of that, that's all very well thought out. It's the infrastructure projects where His Excellency will be grappling with how do we do that? How do we ensure we have that in place? And then also ensuring that they'll have citizens' safety front of mind. So how do we ensure that that information is being used in the correct way, in the fair, the right way? And that will be cultural, as my colleague here said. There will be different rules in different countries depending on what they deem fair and right to be. And that's why swapping data and things like that is not easy at all. And that's something that you'd be building with very much with that in mind. But it's the size of the system, the sort of information that it needs. Is it physical data, sensor data? Is it proprietary collected data? But the wonderful thing to know is there are so many engineers, scientists, who understand this very well, data scientists. They would be able to map out the architecture of pretty much any system that you imagined. And that's what's so beautiful about this technology, and that's why I love it. Come up with any real-world problem. Go and speak to somebody, a data scientist, a machine learning engineer, and they'll be able to draw out, this is potentially what one might need, and then theoretically, this is the sort of model, and then obviously there's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that models are developed and they're performant, because there's no point having a non-performant model. And here's the potential output. And that's why, again, going back to that question that you asked, which sounds like a simple question, but it's the most important question, is it overhyped? No. Because you can use your imagination. This is where you have to be curious. You have to be creative. And then it's about mathematics and science and bringing all of that together. And that's why this technology is just potentially, it's already so powerful, but can be so much more powerful for all of you and all of the use cases that you can think of.
We can see your passion clearly for the
field.
Yeah,
I love solving problems. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people who love solving problems. Yeah. And like my colleague at the end there, he was talking about, I think, just two of the closest areas to my heart as well. And having people like that working on solving the world's biggest problems, they're not just focused on their bottom line, because these are hard sectors. It's much harder. And I'm happy to have that challenge and argument with someone. It is much more challenging to get the funding, the VC funding, right? To get the angel funding for an AI application in a public sector area or an impact sector such as healthcare or education than it is, for example, in fintech or retail. It is much harder because you have to show it works, and showing it works takes a long time. You need people's buy-in, and they're very risk averse in those sectors. But what is wonderful is you have people who have that energy, that drive. They want to make it work, and they persevere. And eventually you end up with the most beautiful applications of this technology for good.
Absolutely. I think on that note of passion, Dr. Hanan, that's what got you to found Women in AI. Can you shed some light on the importance of ecosystem building and what the gaps were that you found that got you and prompted you basically to start this initiative?
Yeah, so there's a cute story behind how we started it. So I just finished my PhD and did like 2 years of research, and then there was like this hype around like building startups, and there's a lot of events like Startup Weekend where you go and just spend a weekend to build a startup on AI. And so I saw that and I said, okay, let me go, just to experiment. I wasn't really in that field, I was more in research. And there I met my co-founder, Muzan Asghari, and she had a business background. And she asked me, like, what do you do? And I said, I have a PhD in AI. And then she said, oh my God, like you are like the only girl or woman that I've seen here that actually had a technical background in AI. And this is where we started to discuss. We looked around and there wasn't really a lot of women there, and the women who were in that startup weekend about AI, like we're just doing marketing, etc. So things that are not really technical. And this is how it started. So we identified gaps where we found there aren't a lot of women participating in this revolution. There aren't a lot of role models that can also inspire others. The problem starts really at an early age because women generally are not encouraged to do STEM studies, and eventually you don't have women in AI or in leadership positions. It is changing because there are a lot of initiatives like Women in AI. And so, yeah, about the importance of building an ecosystem, it is extremely very important to, bring together, ideas, knowledge, sharing knowledge, and also a place where, for example, women can feel comfortable and can thrive in AI and can learn from each other. Because, you might have someone who's interested in AI, they don't know a lot about it, but then, being part of this ecosystem, they get inspired by others who have maybe technical background, they share together, they build together, and it becomes more, like it helps advance, this goal. And how are we doing this in Women in AI? How are we increasing the participation and representation of women? Of course, through education first, like workshops to encourage young girls to, introduce young girls to these kinds of, to AI, robotics, or any tech, like STEM in general, and solve the problem from a young age. Events, of course, so inviting women speakers to showcase their work in AI or anything related to AI, and in this way you can help nurture role models that would be inspiring, so you have more women on stage, for example. Events, also like bringing the community together, and being part of a community is really, really very, very important, because it really helps to find opportunities, to find someone that you can rely on, to share ideas, etc.
Interesting. And have there been any projects that came out of that? Any startups came out of the Women in AI that you
Not
believe
really startups, but we are a part of many activities that allow to work towards an inclusive AI. For example, we are a member of the UN Women for Ethical AI. Actually, the current person who's managing Women in AI is the co-chair of Women for Ethical, like the UNESCO's Women for Ethical AI, where we are working with them to implement the UNESCO's recommendation for having an ethical AI, and also to make sure that the gender lens is taken into account and that we have more diversity in AI. We do some research. We are part of some research projects. We're always, ensuring diversity in the project, or even doing events that would increase the participation and representation of women in the field, and even doing research on bias in AI. So because also the problem of bias, one part of it is due to data. You have biased data, and this it's irrelevant who's working on AI, but the other part is also if you don't have the perspective of everyone when you are designing. We're speaking about design and transferring stereotypes.
Absolutely.
It's good to have the the perspective of everyone, including women or people that believe that a technology should be inclusive and should not be biased, and should be designed in a way that actually helps solve bias rather than introducing it unconsciously to the minds of people.
I'm glad somebody's solving that problem, because it is a problem on many levels. Your Excellency, while AI is still evolving, from your perspective, what are the most important lessons we've learned regarding AI adoption and adaptation in both government and private sectors, particularly in the past 2 years?
When it comes for learned lesson, I think from our journey in Dubai, inclusivity is very important, especially that to engage with every partner and every stakeholder in the city, especially to keep this dialogue open, to understand the implication of this new technology. And also to set, for example, or to provide them with the right solution in case, for example, a policy required or a framework required, or for example, a support is needed on that perspective. And also in identifying the solutions. AI will not solve all the problems. AI is one of the technologies today, we see it in our industry. However, it doesn't mean that it will be the solution for any problem you face it in your, let's say, career or in your, for example, industry. We need to identify the right solution for the right problem. And the AI need to be transparent in terms of the logic it is actually giving the results, and to build the trust for the public, because today making it very explainable for the audience and very explainable and trusted for the audience, it will increase the adoption of using such technology in the industry and also applying it in many services in the city. And the legislation or the framework need to be evolving. The AI is going to evolve. What we are seeing today is only the 2 years big move, but we expect that the AI will be evolving from a perspective of a technology, so the framework, the laws, and the regulation need to be also evolved to address and adapt the new technology.
Absolutely. Priya, you've created an award-winning company that works, and you develop AI-powered learning tools. You've revolutionized personalized learning technology in schools, colleges, universities, and workplaces globally. What is a priority skill, in your opinion, above all others that we need to enable ourselves in an AI world?
Sorry, what's the priority?
Okay. Okay. What is the priority skill from your work on learning platforms? Yeah.
I feel like I'm slightly ruining my keynote next, but I'll tell you.
You'll give us some snippets, that's fine.
I think the priority skill is critical thinking.
Right.
So critical thinking is the key skill that we need to focus on. Why? And it leads back to what we've all talked about today. So you don't get an AI model in any system, whether it's whatever you're using on your smartphones now, to what you're using at work, to a smart city, without the data that feeds it.
Yeah.
We have to be able to question and evaluate that data. And as my colleague said, for example, to understand what data is going in, is there bias in that data set? We have to be able to evaluate that, question it, be critical of it. But also, as you said, who's working on the system, right? I don't know, again, I'm going to ask the audience, right? Put your hand up if the female in your household spends more dirhams than the man when it comes to shopping. Oh, I got a straight hand. She's been buying handbags at the Ball of Emirates. Okay, perfect. She's smiling as well. So females actually, in a sense, are larger consumers, right? So actually, if you're missing out on women helping you build those systems and you have a purely consumer app, you potentially are missing out on how to build and develop that model in a way that will then appeal to that key audience, which is really interesting. So when it comes to the data itself, it's having that ability to evaluate. The other reason, which I'll talk about briefly, because I'm going to go into this afterwards, and it really, really does affect how we think about this, what we do with ourselves from today onwards, but also what we do with our children. But the over-reliance on systems, right? Is it going to be the case that if we have self-driving cars all over Dubai, imagine Sheikh Zayed Road, and there's self-driving cars, and there's not going to be any traffic going to the Palm for that lovely restaurant reservation. Imagine that world, okay? But does that mean none of you will have a driver's license? Because if none of you have a driver's license and something goes wrong and a choice needs to be made, are you relying on the engineers that develop that system to make that choice? You don't even know who they are. You don't know what choice that self-driving vehicle will make. And I'm going to give a really interesting example, a real case of example, where exactly that sort of choice had to be made. And then the third reason, which I'm going to go into in a lot of detail, so I won't do too much now, but is about our news. And I'm going to talk about the future of truth. We are in a world today where, think about it, a third of people receive their news from social media apps. A third of you. A third of you are on various applications. I don't know exactly the popular ones here, but where I am, it's TikTok, it's Snap, it's Meta, Facebook, X, the old Twitter. And if a third of people are receiving their news from social media apps, and a lot of that information is created by citizen journalists, not trained journalists, we then have this really interesting combination of AI. And I love this because it's my two worlds colliding. I used to be a barrister for the news, and now I build and run AI companies. A social media application has an algorithm. And it's giving you what you really love to be engaged with, because it does not want you to log off. It wants you to consume more and more and more. That algorithm is a little bit like a recommendation algorithm, like maybe a sort of collaborative filtering, matrix factorization, but the sort of algorithm that's just trying to understand your behaviors and giving you more and more of the genres, the categories of things that you like, okay? So it's feeding you that. Now, we would class that as a non-generative AI application of artificial intelligence, okay? And then on the other hand, you now have generative AI, where content creation has never been easier, right? Initially, if somebody wanted to fill the world with lots of fake news, it would take a lot of work, a lot of artist-type applications to create a deep fake, for example, and maybe a lot of people to be pushing it through those applications. Now you just need one person, generative AI, and a bot, and off it goes. And it can feed these machines with all sorts of nonsense. And so you have to decide, like, do I actually have the skills today? Does my child have the skills as they grow up to be discerning about what news they're consuming and what is the difference between fake and fact? And I'll give you the reality of the situation. But with respect, I'm sat next to His Excellency, and His Excellency would be mortified if anybody had a deep fake of him on social media today. And we would deal with that, and we would send out the lawyers, and we'd be able to stop it. What I'm really worried about is when there's not one deep fake of him, but there's 10,000. And that becomes really, really challenging. So the reason why critical thinking is a skill that we must nurture and develop both ourselves, and I'm going to show you some stats later, and it's undeniable that many adults actually are conned by fake news, right, every single day. And also our children are consuming this. It's absolutely essential we develop and nurture that skill in ourselves and in our children to be very, very careful about what we're consuming and what we believe. And that we question, again, we evaluate, what is that? Where did it come from? Where was the source of media? Now, what's really important is whichever country you are from, think carefully. In the curriculum today, in the education curriculum that is examined, and when something is examined, we treasure what we measure. So all the children going through those examination systems, what is the key base of those examination systems? In the UK, for example, it's a knowledge-based system, right? We don't necessarily favour some of those, what people like to call soft skills. I call them core skills. Don't call them soft skills. They sound less important than hard skills. But we don't tend to focus on those. They're actually quite hard to teach. And if they're hard to teach, they're hard to assess. And if they're hard to assess, they're hard to measure. Do you see how this works? So the problem is you end up with education systems where you're not focused on skills like critical thinking because they're really hard to measure. They're hard to systemize. And if they're hard to systemize, having 939 children in the average secondary school in the UK means you've got to systemize something because you don't have one-to-one or one-to-two teaching. So the question and the challenge for us is how do we nurture and develop that key skill particularly? Because that is the skill we need to ensure we end up with the right data. We're not just relying on systems as AI, infiltrates every single part of our life, saying, well, the AI gave it to me. It's a system. Of course it works. Well, are you sure? Who developed it? What was the data source? Is it as performant as it could be? Is it giving me the right recommendations at the right time? Or actually, is this wrong? And question that. Second, should I be lazy as a human and over-rely on this system? The answer is no, and I'm going to prove the point in about half an hour. And then the third is be careful what you consume. And in order to be careful, we need to nurture and develop that key skill. And because otherwise, and this was the worry, you end up in a world where you erode trust. And if you end up in a world where you erode trust and you erode truth, we're going to have our children grow up in a world where we don't know what to believe. And then what we have is the liar's dividend. And that was a term coined by academics where even authentic news gets questioned. People look at authentic news and they say, is that a fake? I don't believe it. And you end up in that sort of situation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, on that note, I want to ask Harrison about private sector, but that thin line between adopting innovation and at the maximum and then like over-regulation and the risks of stifling innovation. What do you want to see happen in the field? What's your future outlook for it?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, this is the million and billion dollar question.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, to your point about innovation and not wanting to stifle it, even if I wanted to, I can't. Because the technology, AI, is so accessible. It's so democratized in terms of who can access it, right? Priya talked about the bot, one person, and you can create 10,000 deepfakes. That's not possible. I think the idea is a couple of things. One is, what is the right set of frameworks and guardrails that you can put around it to at least get a sense? The second is educate the public, educate the people to create awareness so that they can make those either critical decisions and higher level thinking to ensure that, okay, this is from a suitable source. This is from somebody who's reputable. This is someone I can trust or not. And then third is, for us, our genesis of EN, formerly known as Etisalat, is the local incumbent telco. So we have abundance amount of trust within the public. And we don't want to jeopardize that one iota. And the reason is, with all these new technology, we can easily access it, push the latest product and technology, but at the end of the day, if we erode trust by using data that we shouldn't, by sending out certain promos and offers that people did not sign up for or want, right? You can lose trust in one single second, whereas it takes years or decades to build up. So I think you kind of need to look at all that holistically to ensure that you have the right balance between really accelerating, pushing forward innovation versus being mindful about it. Now, if you were to ask me, you don't work for EN, you're not the group chief strategy officer of this large technology conglomerate, you work for a startup, right? 3 people in a garage, I may answer that differently because what you have to lose and what you have to gain is so different and the technology is readily available, right? So I think it really depends on the lens you're looking through, and I'm sure my other colleagues here on stage looking at it from the Dubai government perspective, looking at it from a startup perspective, academia may also be very different.
Excellent. And I want to ask our last question here, Dr. Hanan. You're working on socially and emotionally developed or technologically advanced robots. How do you want to see, what's your view for Society 5.0? What does that mean to you, and how do you see the way forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I see the future where, socially and like emotionally intelligent machines, not just robots, are able to be integrated in our society and interact really naturally with humans and understands the humans. But I see their application is really for social good because one danger when you are developing something that might be more intelligent than you, if you don't have the social intelligence, for example, is that it would have a lot of risks on the society. For example, more social isolation, which we are already seeing it with social media and the phones. You can also, manipulation. So it can be used to manipulate people. It can be used to also like inject ideas, certain ideas, and then you're really risking your society as a whole. So I want also one of my, my hopes is also to have robots or machines that are not just capable, but they are ethical. So we need to implement, ethics and the capacity to take ethical decisions into these robots. So for the Society 5.0, basically, it would be great to have AI and the humans work collaboratively with each other, with the human at the center, and prioritizing human well-being over profit, because our society is unfortunately driven by profit, driven by money. It's good. We need like strong economies, but we also need economies that are centered on the human, because this is like the human is the center of it all, after all. It is the human who created it, and it is the human that needs to be protected from it eventually.
Excellent. I think this sparked our interest in the NYU lab. Would we be able to come and visit and see some of the work that you guys do? Is it open to the public or is it not?
Yeah, sure. Anybody can come and see what we are doing.
That's an invitation to our audience here if they want to come in and see what NYU
We also
is
have
doing.
a Center of AI and Robotics. That's my lab is part of it, and we're working on many different aspects of robotics, not just social robotics. So.
Excellent. I'm extending an invitation on your behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to my panelists for sharing all this insightful information that you have. Thank you to the audience for being here and being with us for the whole hour. And I hope that you have been able to take something back with you today and be part of this exciting journey of AI development. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ita.